Welcome to the future. Technologies and innovations that sculpt our industry. This episode brought to you by Haven IAQ, your home's ultimate clean air solution for active air management. Learn more at haveniaq.com. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC podcast. So today we're spending some time with Kevin Hart, the Canadian, not the comedian, from Haven IAQ. How are you doing, my friend?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. We've talked about a variety of topics in our industry that really need to be relooked at, and one of them is like residential controls, and why no one cares about residential controls and why they really should, especially in today's society where we have controls for everything. I mean, I've got controls for appliances. Wouldn't you think that I'd want to have controls for my comfort besides just the thermostat?
Totally. And especially for indoor air quality. We got smart thermostats a few years ago, and they're Wi-Fi connected, and we all know that they're learning and they're smart, and sometimes that doesn't always go as planned.
Yeah.
But in particular, the indoor air quality controls for residential have been really inadequate, and that's been our observation. And so thought we would talk to you about it. I know you also had a background in controls, or at least being interested in the controls world.
Oh, yeah, that was my world. So especially by the time I got into the commercial refrigeration sector, and then I was all building automations controls. So, I mean, I had 160 stores that I could monitor, review. I could, change inputs and outputs, from my couch with a beer in my hand.
Yeah. So, and especially being from the commercial world where controls are great, and we got building automation systems, they're so advanced, they can respond to changes in occupancy levels. Yeah. But in the residential world, we don't even have enough relays to connect to the equipment that we need to control. I mean, if you're thinking about like a dumb humidistat or an ERV controller, these things are like, do you want to be off or on? Maybe you can do min or max. These things are really, really quite antiquated. They're things you might expect 50, 60 years ago. And so I guess one of our big questions is, why isn't the IAQ residential controls world catching up? And how is this holding us back as an industry from really doing proper IAQ?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we think about, this transition in technologies where we're moving from single stage and two stage, indoor and outdoor systems to all variable modulating systems, that's the whole principle. I use inputs and I use a controller to manage outputs, and I change that capacity based on what I need. Like you're thinking about, like a humidifier, right? Do I want to just flood a humidifier pad with water, or do I want to control how much moisture I'm actually needing to put into my space? Filtration, there's so many things we can look at. Dehumidification controls. Are switches dead? Because I'm thinking maybe they should be.
Well, I think there should be something behind it. There should be some intelligence behind the switch. I think we're beyond setting 50% RH and walking away. I think we know that doesn't work. Maybe it works in the summer, maybe it doesn't work in the winter, right? There's some things that are seasonal. There's some things that would work better if it had knowledge about the indoor air quality, the actual performance of the home. And then things like, is there even anybody in the home? And there's so many variables in a home, like, is the shell of the home tight? Is it a tight building envelope? Is the ductwork leaky? Is there a cooking event that we want to respond to? Is there a chemical event that we want to ventilate because of? Or maybe the air quality outside is bad. Maybe there's a wildfire. We don't want to bring that air in, right? So there. If you were to give me, a list of, Kevin, what would you want out of a smart IAQ controller? I would give you back a fairly long list of things that I would want, and I'm not seeing that in what we have today. And I think that really sets back the industry, because there are people who want to do this work. They want to put indoor air quality equipment in. And by the time they have, 2 or 3 pieces of equipment to handle the different pillars of indoor air quality, things are not talking to each other. Things are not working very well. And then the opportunity for callbacks goes up significantly because the homeowner is not comfortable. And typically these are discerning homeowners who want the best. Currently, we want to bring that bar down. We want everybody to have good indoor air quality, but currently the controls aren't delivering on the expectations of the homeowners. And so we're putting the people who are doing this work under a lot of liability that the solutions aren't going to do what they were intended to do because the controls, which frankly is unfair to the contractors who are putting that effort in.
Well, let's think about those controls, right? So if we're thinking about the total comfort of a structure, we're not just talking about a thermostat, right? We're talking about ventilation controls, we're talking about humidity controls, we're talking about filtration, and we're talking, from holistically, like how do we
Mhm.
manage this and so that we're actually looking at it from an efficiency perspective as well, right? Like, when do I need to run these things and how much do I actually need to run them? And
Right. And what you just
yeah,
touched on were two different concepts that ended up in what we're calling the care
hmm
framework. And so we're saying people don't care about residential controls. That's right now what we're going out and saying. We're making a big statement there. But care, it's really an acronym, CARE. And you just touched on two of them, which is that we think controls should be comprehensive.
yeah,
What does comprehensive mean?
yeah.
It means, the home is a system, right?
I need 5 different controls on this wall. Somebody
Yeah.
run some new control wire for me.
Yeah, we need an
Oh,
IAQ controls that's not 5 different dumb controls, but
yeah.
that's one intelligent control that's taking in different inputs and outputs. It's more of a building automation system than
Yes.
a humidistat and a thermostat and a bunch of things that aren't talking to each other. So that's the first thing we mean, is comprehensive. That's what we think. We think every system should be able to control filtration and ventilation and humidity and circulation and your sensible, standard heating and cooling, that should all be controllable. And currently, good luck finding an IAQ controller that can do all of those things, that have enough relays and that have the sort of software and intelligence to be able to operate all those pieces of equipment, and then with algorithms that do it in a fairly smart way on top of that.
So I wonder, are we starting to move into a point where we can start eliminating some of the physical controls and move into a IoT world where we can actually manage these things remotely? I mean, we still have to have controls, like physical controls, but the actual analytics behind it.
Yeah. And actually that's the framework that we're coming to, is that if you look at, I mean, Jim Bergman told me that the 24-volt wiring that the industry is doing is just not very sophisticated. I mean, we're not electricians, and some of the wiring gets really complicated. And just in general, the training out there for technicians, it hasn't been amazing. And as we're bringing new people in the industry, there's already so much they have to learn. And so now you're asking people, when they want to do fairly sophisticated things, and the homeowners are saying, well, I want this, and when this happens, I want this other thing to happen, or I want to interlock so that when this turns on, this thing doesn't turn on at the same time. I mean, to go to figure out the wiring schematic for what you want to do, I mean, it gets fairly complicated. And even some of it, I was an electrician. I look at some of the stuff Tim DeStasio does in his own home, and he's buying little transformers and little
Mhm.
relays and
Yeah.
little switches and contactors and solenoids, and I'm looking at some of the stuff he's doing, and I'm getting overwhelmed trying to figure out and trying to trace the wiring and figure out what's going on. But it's pretty hard. If it's one thing to talk about people who are in building science because they really care and they're taking
Right.
the time to do it right. But if you're trying to say, hey, this has to scale to a 200 truck contractor, and whatever technician just started on Monday is being given this job where they have to wire up all these things, and it includes all these physical interlocks and all the sort of sophisticated things a homeowner could ask for. I don't think it's practical to do all the wiring.
I don't.
So I totally agree with you that it should be, a lot of this can be done in software. A lot of the heavy lifting, because at the end of the day, if you actually go to the piece of equipment, that piece of equipment has very minimal amount of outputs that it can give you, right? Where there's still, almost every IAQ piece of equipment is 24 volts. That means we're
Right.
dealing with a limited number of terminals.
Yep.
And so everything else are just trying to make some sort of automation or logic work, and trying to say, well, this piece of equipment can't be on when this piece of equipment is on, stuff like that. And people are trying to do it through physical wires, and we believe that a lot of that can be done in software, and that's going to greatly simplify because you can reconfigure it in software remotely. You could be back at home, you could be back at the office after a day of hard work, setting these things up remotely, or at least configuring it in the home, and then you can change it later over time.
100% agree. I keep saying that it's time for our industry as a whole to start requiring our manufacturers to come to a unified communicating platform. Because right now we all have our own proprietary thermostats, which really what it comes down to is our proprietary algorithms for our communicating, our PWM communicating that we're doing on these 5-volt DC communicating networks. And did you know that there was actually a time where our industry tried doing this, but it didn't have enough push because at the time people didn't understand this. So in the 1990s, we had this thing called the Climate Talk Alliance. And it was an industry group, very much like Better HVAC, that was saying, you know what, we're getting tired of all these switches. And we're getting tired of all these proprietary thermostats. Why don't you all start talking on the same language? And we had a bunch of manufacturers, including some of our home automation things like hot water heaters and boilers and appliances. So some of our different manufacturers like GE and Rheem and a variety of different ones all joined this alliance. And they all decided that they were going to talk in the same language so that our home automation engineers, our home automation technicians could do this. They could literally, now I wasn't talking, remote connection at the time. It was a matter of, hey, I'm on site. Let me get my scanner or my tool. Let's connect to this system and I can manage this system all from one device. And we're like, yeah, that's great. And here we are, almost 30 years later and we're going, hey, anybody got that 18.8 control wire? I got a whole bunch of relays I got to put together.
I like OBD2 ports in automotive. That's a
Yes.
miracle and I know you know more about the background of that, but I think also
Yeah.
one thing is that with heating and cooling systems going to inverters and getting more complicated and having heat pumps, it makes sense to go to communicating because there's so much more
Yes.
we need the system to do. It's not just on or off anymore, and it's not one or two stages. It's multi-stage, and so you want to do sophisticated things there. I think in indoor air quality, there could be a similar equivalent to communicating controls in indoor air
Absolutely.
quality. I think you might want a ERV, for example. You might want independent control of the dampers. You might want to
Mhm.
say that I want the ERV to be sometimes negative and then sometimes positively pressurized, maybe based on the weather.
Yeah.
You might want to be able to say that I want to change the CFM automatically. I want it to boost at certain times. Maybe humidifier has variable output. Maybe it's not just on or off, And so I think there are interesting things we could do in a communicating world of IAQ, but I think that there's a lot of opportunities in what we have in 24 volts that currently isn't even being exploited for what we have.
Hmm.
Frankly, how many ERVs do you think leverage more than just a single speed? Like how many ERVs do you think ever change speeds after the day it was commissioned?
I would say very few. How many of them are capable of it? A lot. But how
Yeah.
many are set up for that? Rarely do I ever encounter it.
Yeah. So, I think IAQ is an interesting world where we actually have more capabilities than we're leveraging.
I agree.
And so I'd say step one is let's leverage what we have intelligently. And there's so much we can do pulling out of band data, like what's happening outdoors with the weather, what's happening indoors with a couple additional sensors that we can add. There's so much we can do already that, yes, I do think things should go communicating in the future, but let's start with what we have and actually leverage that.
Yeah, I like it. And there are a lot of controls companies out there that I'm sure would be very interested in putting these controls together. We've got friends over at like ICM, and we've got friends over at Jackson Systems that's all they do is
Mhm.
build controls to do whatever functions that we have. And you're right, we just haven't seen it on the IAQ side. So we covered comprehensive. What is the A?
Adaptable. So we believe that controls need to adapt. And what does that mean? It means,
Mm.
imagine selling your customers on an IAQ package, which instead of improving their indoor air quality, it brought in pollution into the home. It brought in wildfire smoke. because there's smoke outside,
Yeah.
because it wasn't set up. It didn't adapt to the outdoor conditions. We talk about demand control, which, yeah, it's been sort of framed as saving energy, but also can be used to boost things, to have better indoor air quality outcomes. And so there is a triangle where people say you either get energy efficiency or you get or indoor air quality. You can't have both.
Mm.
And we would say that, well, if the controls could adapt and if on demand they could adjust the settings, you actually sort of do get the best of both worlds, and that probably the net is at least neutral, if not positive, in that you're saving energy when you don't need things versus them being on constantly at a low speed, and then you're optimizing for indoor air quality quickly when you need them the most.
Man, I think about states like Florida with blower door testing, and then if you get below a certain point, you have to add outside air, but then it stops right there. It says you need to add outside air. Okay,
Hmm.
how much air? And what quality of air? Am I even monitoring the quality of air? And if I was to monitor it, how can I treat that air? Because, we set up all these controls to maintain our indoor air, and then all of a sudden we go, oh, and by the way, let's go ahead and open up a 6-inch motorized damper and let's draw in some outside air, and I don't even know what it looks like, and let's just put it back into our system.
Yeah. Well, and I would ask a similar question to previous, which is like, how out of how many installs that happen per year in different climate zones, in different homes with different homeowners, how many of those are really being personalized, customized, and commissioned in all the different homes,
Right.
or is it just copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, right? Which is, I would probably think that it's the latter. I would probably think, and frankly, depending on your climate zone and what's happening outdoors outside of your home, and then even what's happening inside of your home. How many pets do you have? How much do you like cooking in your kitchen? How much do you like cleaning in your home? All of these things, how much do you like paintings,
Mm.
or you just bought brand new hardwood floors, or whatever it is. Homes are dynamic and they're different, and depending on who lives in the home, if that home gets sold and new people move in, you're going to have a totally different indoor air quality demand. And so, I would ask the question, um, are the controls being set up to adapt to that climate zone, to that home, and to the homeowners? For the most part, I would say probably not.
No, no, none that I've seen. What about R?
Yeah, so R is, and those were the two kind of, I would say those are the two very functionally interesting ones out of this
Mm-hmm.
acronym. The next two, I would shift the narrative a little bit to, we want to add more sophistication, when we want to add more technology, because there's benefits to doing that, but it also has to be reliable. These controls have to be reliable, because we know that if they're not reliable and you get callbacks, you're just going to stop doing it,
Yeah.
right? And IAQ controls, as they get smarter, they have the opportunity to stop working properly. We've all seen this, especially, I think a lot of IAQ controls and sensors, IAQ sensors, require an internet connection,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's one potential issue if we talk about reliability. What if your system just stops working because you lost the internet?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or what about all the homes that don't have internet? Maybe it's residential new construction. They don't have the
Mm-hmm.
internet when that home is completed. Or maybe your power gets knocked out, or maybe the homeowner just doesn't want these devices on their network. And so how can we still create a reliable, consistent experience, even in this context, where the internet is a factor that we can't depend on? So that's a question, because I really do see that IQ controls are gonna hit the market at some point, and they're probably going to be dependent on an internet connection. And so one of the frameworks we have is, as we move into an IAQ future with better controls, how do we make sure these controls are reliable? That's something we hear over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we think about the equipment itself, we really are going to have to be aware of that E perspective of that.
Efficiency.
Yes.
Yes, that is something that we also really care about. We think that controls obviously are critical to how long that thing's going to be running, how much energy it's going to be consuming. Oh, we got another friend on the podcast. There might be some pet dander in the air that needs to be filtered. With a premium, on the cost of energy and an ever-increasing focus on minimizing the time on service calls, IQ control should be not only efficient, IQ control should be efficient in how they operate, but they also need to be efficient in terms of how we install them. And so there's a bit of a dual meaning to efficiency here. We believe that these IAQ controls, as they get more complicated, more sophisticated, we need some mechanism to make sure that they get set up properly and quickly. We don't think that okay, Clifton, we're going to give you really complicated, really sophisticated controls, and now it's going to be, a full day of commissioning and a huge bill to get it set up. We need some really advanced technician who's been through multiple training sessions to do this, and maybe they get it wrong. That kind of speaks to reliability, but we think it needs to be efficient. And one of the ways that we propose to do that is through templates. We think that there could be a templated approach where you say, this is what I'm trying to achieve. I'm trying to achieve these, installing a humidifier and a dehumidifier and some filtration and some ventilation based on these parameters. There should be a template that kind of pops out and gives you the wiring diagram and gives you the automation defaults that make sense. And then if you want to edit them, that's cool.
Right.
If you just want to click next, complete, right, and you want to get to the end and have them set up in a smart way, then it should be able to do that. It should be efficient, and it should work even if you're not a total expert spending your whole day staring at a screen and becoming an expert.
Yeah, I'm in zone blah, and here are all my presets that should be relatively optimized for this zone. Of course, I can customize them if I need to, but pre-packaged set of operational conditions.
Yeah, and that's a big concern. We have a big concern that we get to this future of more sophisticated IQ controls, and it's just, look at the current thermostats that have IQ capabilities. They're buried deep in the advanced settings.
Yep.
If you want energy efficiency and you want demand control and you want humidity set points that dynamically change throughout the year based on the outdoor temperature to prevent condensation on windows, all these are very advanced settings in most thermostats. You have to go hunt for these settings to activate them and configure them. And so you basically need a full education on that piece of control equipment that you're setting up. And we believe that actually needs to change. We think that you should provide a couple simple inputs of what you're trying to achieve. Maybe you're trying to achieve energy efficiency. Maybe you're trying to optimize for indoor air quality because you have a homeowner who's sensitive to certain indoor air quality parameters. We believe that the system should provide some templated or default presets that deliver on the promise without making the burden land on the technician.
I love it. And so when are you applying for the patent for this?
Well, with many industry changes that need to happen, we don't think that any of those ideas should be patented. We believe that I truly would love to see everyone in the industry move towards this framework, this CARE framework. We think that IQ controls need to get out of the 80s or wherever they came from and move towards this future, because it's going to be better for human health. It's going to be better for energy efficiency, and it's going to make it much more likely that contractors offer IQ and that homeowners are satisfied by the IQ that they purchased. And so it's a win-win for the market and for the customers.
Sounds like we're providing better HVAC.
Yes, that's the goal. That is the goal.
That is the goal.
Yeah, and so, we have a roadmap at Haven to deliver on this CARE framework. And to be frank, we're not fully there in all areas. And I think there's others who probably have aspects of this on the roadmap. But if you're in the controls world and you're listening to this and you do residential IQ controls, we would, invite you to think about this framework and think about this roadmap and, how we're going to move the industry to a better place.
Excellent. And if someone is interested in contacting you to have further conversations about this, what's the best route?
They can go to haveniq.com. We've got an email contact form there, or they can go, info@haveniq.com. There's different mechanisms from our website to contact us. And if they just want to create an account and try out Haven, it's pro.haveniq.com.
Excellent. I think about all of our brilliant technicians out here that have a passion for IT as well, and they're sitting here going, you know what? I I think I could actually be the right person for organizing, this layout of data, and I could create some code for this. And then you got me out here going, I just want to connect the stuff, and I want someone to come up with the quick button for doing this.
That
So,
that is the tension, right? Because we have people who are
yeah.
like, oh, that should be open sourced, and I should be able to create, Python scripts or SQL or whatever it is. And then you have other people who are like, how do I get in and out of this home as quick as possible so I can get back
Hmm.
to my family, and whatever. So it's quite the tension to try to figure out, what those are two different user experiences, right? One is we're open. You write your interface, you write your scripts, you write your algorithms, and it'll work with our hardware. That's the open source model. And then you got this very closed source model, and you get the whole Apple experience. And I don't really believe that either of those, if you focus solely on them, are a great solution for the whole industry. I think either there needs to be two companies who do a really good job of either, or you need to find a balance between those two. And currently we're trying to find where that balance point is, pun intended.
No, absolutely. And we're looking for your input. This is one of these topics that is going to evolve in our industry. We are going to start putting pressure on our manufacturers to work with a unified communicating platform. And so it opens up a lot of opportunities for us as an industry to go, you know what? We have some updating to do. We have the ability to take existing control networks that we have and build ways for those to communicate. We have the ability to take our current resources and be better at what we're doing. So we have a lack of quality controls in our residential IAQ industry that needs to change. We're encouraging you to participate. We're encouraging you to go, oh yeah, I guess we don't. Let's join forces and see if we can't come up with something better, or encourage some of our manufacturers to do that as well.
Love it. Yeah.
Same here, Kevin Hart. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you hanging out with us, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, Clifton. Thanks for having me on.